He was called the Black George Washington. He fought off 3 empires and enraged Napoleon. He championed liberty and égalité for all, Toussaint Louverture, and the Haitian Revolution. In the summer of 1789, when Haiti was still the dormant colony of Saint-Domingue, it was France that grabbed the world's attention. Parisian mobs rioted against the French king and against their own desperate poverty, chanting slogans for liberty, equality, and brotherhood. What was a dangerous idea in France was even more dangerous in its slave-holding colonies off the coast of Florida, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and an island known as the Pearl of the Antilles. Today, the western half is Haiti. Then it was the French colony of Saint-Domingue. Few intended colonial slaves should take democratic ideas to heart. Far too much was at stake. Sugar greased the wheels of the 18th century economy, and Saint-Domingue was the sugar capital of the world. In August 1791, the slaves of Saint-Domingue planned to revolt. They timed their uprising to start on multiple plantations in 2 weeks' time, and they swore each other to secrecy. On the night of August 22nd, 1791, 1,000 enslaved Africans attacked their masters.
For them to be free, they have to have the same amount of violence that you exerted on them. That's why the revolution was very brutal.
The rebel numbers grew from 1,000 to 20,000 as newly liberated slaves burned cane fields and refineries in order to destroy the system that had enslaved them. In the autumn of 1791, Toussaint Louverture could no longer sit on the sidelines. The island's 500,000 slaves outnumbered whites by 12 to 1, but their ultimate prospects were poor. Few had experience in military strategy, and they had no unifying history or long-term vision. As rebel leaders struggled to forge a disciplined fighting force, Toussaint's talents and intellect set him apart. Less than 2 years after joining the rebellion, Toussaint Louverture had risen to the top of the rebel army. Toussaint's forces captured 3 cities within 8 months. But the credit did not rest with Toussaint alone. He had several able commanders working under him, men like Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who shared his soldiers' life experiences more closely than Toussaint. Saint-Domingue's white planters were desperate. Many hated the new order in France. In a treasonous move, they invited the British to help put down the slave rebellion. Now, the empires of France, Spain, and England, along with a vast army of former slaves, were fighting for control of the small island colony. In early 1794, events in Paris caused another explosion in the colony. The French National Assembly endorsed the emancipation of Saint-Dominguean slaves. But that was not all. The delegates freed slaves throughout the entire empire, too. It was utterly unprecedented. In a stroke, nearly 1 million black slaves had become French citizens. For Dessalines and Toussaint, emancipation changed everything. After 3 years in opposition, Toussaint Louverture was once again a loyal French citizen. So were his followers. It tipped the balance. Before long, Toussaint, Dessalines, and the army of ex-slaves pushed the Spanish out of Saint-Domingue. The British soon followed. Slaveholders everywhere were stunned and worried. Toussaint had already been appointed Brigadier General and then Governor of Saint-Domingue. No black man had ever risen so far in the colonies. In 1798, as Toussaint Louverture was evicting the last of the British from his island, another French general battled British interest halfway around the world in Egypt. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte.
Well, Toussaint and Napoleon in many ways are similar. Both were a little bit from the margins of French society. They succeeded through military brilliance, and they're both incredible military leaders, and they became political leaders as a result of their military experience.
But Napoleon's victories would put Toussaint's at risk. Just months after conquering Egypt, Napoleon marched into Paris. A coup d'etat toppled the revolutionary government, and Napoleon took the reins of power. He restructured the government and proclaimed a new constitution for France. Far from enshrining black emancipation, it opened the door for France to reinstitute slavery in its colonies.
When Louverture heard that, he really understood that something was changing. And so what he did in kind of typical Toussaint fashion is he responded by saying, okay, Saint-Domingue is going to have its own laws. Well, here they are. I'm in charge here. I might as well write the Constitution.
Toussaint's constitution decreed slavery would never exist in Saint-Domingue again, and it was the first in history to prohibit discrimination based on skin color, a milestone that U.S. law would not guarantee for another 150 years. The Constitution had troubling elements too. It made Toussaint governor for life, with sole authority to designate his successor. In 1802, Toussaint was stunned to see the largest French expeditionary force ever assembled entering Saint-Domingue's harbor. Its mission was simple. Napoleon wanted to turn back the clock. Toussaint Louverture fought the invading French army for 3 grueling months. On May 6, 1802, Toussaint Louverture surrendered. Toussaint was arrested on charges of conspiracy. Toussaint peacefully boarded a ship for France. Saint-Domingue remained mostly calm in Toussaint's wake. Jean-Jacques Dessalines and the other black officers continued cooperating with French General Victor Leclerc. But then, news arrived from the nearby colony of Guadeloupe. Napoleon had reinstated slavery. Saint-Domingue erupted in anger and fear. Dessalines quickly broke from France. One more time, the former slaves of Saint-Domingue took to the field against European armies. In 1803, the French army was finally driven out. 50,000 French soldiers had died. And Saint-Domingue, Haiti, became the world's first Black Republic. But Toussaint Louverture never lived to see victory. By the time Haiti attained the goal he fought so hard to achieve, the imprisoned revolutionary had died in a freezing cell in the mountains of France.